If you'd like, Cam, I can run through everyone we have on the call right now.
That would be a good start.
Okay, take it away, Nick.
Excellent. So executive board here, we have Pike, Caldwell, Ramsey, and Hill, just waiting on Mendenhall. And joining us on the call so far, we have Allen, both Christensen, Niehaus, Talbot, Fulmer, Bierman, Silvestrini, Aaron Mendenhall, Young, Lowry, Kafusi, White. If I didn't list your name and you're joining by phone, I do see one phone number on here.
Matt Durham from Holiday is on.
Oh, and Matt has joined as well.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks for the roll call. I have that agenda up now. And I'll just say, like I've said in a number of these things, it's good to see all of you in person. It's been just a crazy couple weeks, social isolating and everything else. So I appreciate technology, and it's good to see a lot of my friends and colleagues. And I know we're all dealing with some of the same anxieties and issues, and this changes every day. So huge props to all of you that are in this and trying to figure it out as we go. I've got tremendous respect for everybody. So thank you for all working on this together. It means a lot. With the welcome and introduction, we'll go to the 2019-2020 Board of Directors schedule of meetings. Did anybody have any questions or issues about that? Hearing none, that's not an action item. We'll move to review and approval of minutes. Did anybody have any comments or comments really about the January 29 minutes?
Just make the motion that we accept the minutes. This is Jewel.
Don Christensen, second.
Thank you both. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next up, we have conflict of interest disclosure. Did anybody have any thoughts or comments about the conflict of interest disclosure? Cam, that says an action item. You just need to have that.
It's an action item. Yeah, if anybody needed to declare a conflict, so we can just move on to number 4.
Okay, number 4, strategic goals check-in. Take it away, Cam.
Perfect. I echo Mayor Caldwell and thanking everybody for being at the meeting and thanking you for the leadership that you are showing, not just locally, but really throughout our communities during an unprecedented time. What we plan to do at each board meeting for the rest of the year is to check in on these strategic goals, recognizing that the majority of today needs to be spent on COVID-19 and where we're at and where we're going. I'll be brief on this section, but I do think it also helps outline some of the decision making that the officers and we as staff have been making over the last couple of weeks. If you jump down to the strategic goals that you adopted back in December, you'll see them broken down by the 5 different departments within our small shop. The cancellation of mid-year throws a wrench in a lot of these strategic goals, and we are actively trying to figure out some alternatives. And by alternatives, I'm talking virtual trainings rather than an in-person gathering this spring or summer. Recognizing that right now everyone is focused 24/7 on COVID, and that's where our focus is as well. You'll see with training, there were the 2 goals that were really focused on conferences, and so we are already working on planning the annual convention, and hopefully by then we'll be back to normal. Goal number 1 about the strategic plan on training, it was in part why we retained John Park. John, to his credit, we pulled an audible with him over the last few weeks, and we've been using him as a liaison with the City Management Association to gather data about how cities are adapting to the new COVID reality. With the goal around finance and administration, you can see that we want to maximize our programming dollars away from expensive entertainment. That's That was a decision made before the current financial situation, so it's an even smarter decision now. And then goal number 2 has been tricky because of trying to expand the value for sponsors and exhibitors, because half of our events are gone now for 2020. Again, we're hopeful that things will be back to normal by the annual convention, and we have been in touch with every sponsor in the last 2 weeks. And we sent a letter to each sponsor signed by President Mendenhall and me, expressing the board's support of our sponsors and asking them to be patient with us as we figure out some potential alternatives to canceling mid-year this spring. And we did hire Katie, who's been leading that effort. The third is on this cross-department membership engagement piece. The goals revolved around networking opportunities and membership engagement. We had done some analysis. Abby had been leading it in our shop about who had attended league events over the last 3 years. We had looked into scholarships for mid-year, some early bird discounts for mid-year, and obviously that went out the window for the spring, but we're looking to build on that for annual, and it's just part of our overall outreach. I hope that you feel comfortable with the membership engagement over the last 2 weeks. So even though it isn't conference related per se, Abby did some analysis with Carson over the 5 conference calls that we've hosted with the governor, lieutenant governor, and Senator Romney over the last 2 weeks. And we've had over 1,500 people, cities and counties alike, who participated in those calls. Now, some of those folks participated in all 5 of them, but nevertheless, we've had 1,500 plus, and we hit capacity for the first time on Friday afternoon. So we're trying to backfill that to see if we are engaging with our members on COVID to a sufficient degree. We've had really high click rates for the emails that we've been sending on an almost daily basis. So still trying to achieve those goals in the new reality. That leads then to the communication department with goal 1 and 2. We've tried to enhance the visibility of league officers both during the session and then over the last couple of weeks, making sure they've been involved in conference calls with the governor and are aware of all the moving pieces. And then we've been updating our website with materials as fast as possible. We're still using the old framework. The new framework comes online in September, but Carson and Susan have done a great job of putting stuff online, promoting materials on social media, and trying to keep the membership as up to date as possible. And then the last department on the strategic goal front is advocacy. There were 3 goals related to advocacy, some of which revolved around our spring outreach, and our spring outreach has been modified substantially. So we are working through how best to tackle that. Victoria and I did a call last week with a professor at the University of Utah Law School who has an expertise in building consensus, and we talked through our process with her and strategized with her about how we can improve that process. Likewise, in goal number 3, the public coordination between state leaders and league members to elevate city issues during the 2020 campaign. We certainly have increased the coordination between state leaders and league members because of COVID. Susan is sitting on a half a dozen videos right now from 6 different gubernatorial candidates that we were planning to share leading up to caucus night, and obviously caucus night was canceled. And because of all the focus on COVID and the fact that we didn't ask any of the candidates about COVID, we've been holding off on releasing those videos until things slow down a little bit. So in a nutshell, that's where we're at on the strategic goals piece. In future meetings, we can go into more detail, but I wanted to give that to you as an overall framework for how we're trying to meet the objectives you set out for us in light of the unprecedented times over the last couple of weeks. So Mayor Caldwell, I'll turn it to you to see if there's anybody who wants to chime in about the strategic goals before we jump to COVID-19. Mayor, you're muted. So I don't know if you're muted or if Nick muted you, but you're muted.
I was muted. I was going to say, any information or discussion on the strategic goals? Cam, thanks for staying focused on that. I know everybody's juggling a lot right now. You guys are doing a great job of keeping your eye on the price and keeping business going. So we appreciate that. Up next, we have COVID-19 update and ULTC strategy.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. I originally, and by originally I mean last night, I told you Jill Parker, my counterpart at the Association of Local Health Departments, was going to join us for the call. She texted me about 45 minutes ago, said she had an urgent meeting that she needed to be at the same time, and expressed her regrets. That urgent meeting is a conversation amongst the local health departments along the Wasatch Front with Salt Lake County about whether or not those local health departments are going to follow Salt Lake County's lead. Part of what we wanted to accomplish in this board call today was what can we do as staff to help you as cities, and what do your cities need, and what can we learn from each other during this time period. Mike Mendenhall, do I see you on the call now?
I'm here.
Hello. No fire alarm this time?
No, there was a fire alarm at the city as soon as I dialed in, and everybody made a mad rush out of Spanish Fork City Hall, which used to be Thurber School, built in 1905, I believe. And so that makes everybody run a little bit faster out of City Hall when it's a little old. So it was a mad dash outside, and now I'm home on the meeting. So I apologize.
Earthquakes, fire alarms, viruses. You can't make this up.
I blame Ogden. I blame Ogden.
Perfect. Well, welcome, President. We're just starting the COVID conversation now. So let me take a quick moment to update you on where we've been. I'm setting my own timer on this because I don't want to spend most of the time talking. One thing I've learned from the plethora of calls that I've been on over the last 2 weeks is that it's easy to fall into the trap of people just talking and listening as opposed to having a real discussion, and we need some direction from you about how to engage going forward. So I'm set my alarm for 4 minutes to give you a quick update of where we've been and where we are now. John Park and Wayne Bradshaw led the effort on the coordinated survey with the City Managers Association. Wayne, can you take a few seconds to just tell people what that was and why we did it?
Yeah, we surveyed city managers and smaller communities to ask how City Hall is staying open and how cities are continuing to function. We had 66 responses, and the underlying theme is that cities are still open, still functioning, but making some major adjustments to protect employees and the public. So we appreciate everyone's participation.
That survey was sent prior to the governor's directive and prior to the Salt Lake County and Summit County orders. And I was on the phone with a bunch of people over the weekend who are all making additional adaptations based on the directive and the orders. Susan, can you give a quick update about the communication effort thus far?
Yeah, you kind of touched on it, Cam, when you were talking about the video conversations that we've had with Senator Romney and the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor, and those we have broadcast word of those out to our members via social media and email, and we've just had amazing views. We've got, like, for Friday Facts, just a summary of everything. We had like 3,200 opens. I was looking over 4 posts that we did via email and social media, which ended up resulting in the viewership on these conference calls that we're doing. And we've had like 13,000 people read our emails, and so many of them are watching the videos that it gets filled up, or it has become filled up lately. On Facebook, the numbers are phenomenal. Everything's up. The views are up by 26%. The reach is up by 31%. And I think everyone's just starving for information on how to proceed with, dealing with the virus.
The reason I wanted everyone to know this is 2 weeks ago, I told our staff that the Monday after the session ended that COVID-19 was our top priority to help our cities. And we want you to know that's what we've been trying to accomplish. But now as we shift to this new phase we need your direction about where we can best engage. The OPMA executive order, that came from you. You should all be patting yourselves on the back, because when we had our call 2 weeks ago, we brought this up to the Lieutenant Governor that Tuesday morning, and by Wednesday night, we had the executive order, and Victoria put together a group of city attorneys and others that provided some feedback to the governor's office in order to make that executive order happen. And then I already mentioned the conference calls. We will have a conference call tomorrow with the Lieutenant Governor. I'm just waiting on him because he has to change the time. So I'm waiting to hear back from him. And then all of the questions that we submitted to him last week, even the ones he didn't answer, he emailed me last night with more answers. So we'll be promoting those in the next day or two. Okay, so that's a quick snapshot of where we've been. So where we are now is the governor announced his Utah Leads Together plan on Tuesday. I am a member of the Economic Response Task Force that's been working on that plan. And then as you can see, we are participating in 5 different subgroups, several of which are just getting underway today. The housing group will have its first meeting today. We've also been trying to coordinate with trade associations and the Association of Counties. Summit County issued their shelter-in-place order Wednesday evening. Salt Lake City issued their proclamation on Friday. Mayor Mendenhall, has the city since rescinded that proclamation in light of Salt Lake County's order, or are they both still in effect? Are you still muted?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I rescinded that yesterday and immediately signed a 6th proclamation that reflects now the county's measures, and it keeps in place above and beyond that our airport things. There's some restrictions on buying plots in our city cemetery. It made some adjustments to take-home vehicles for employees. But so we did rescind the Friday night and put a new one in place.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. Then I mentioned those subgroups. There's been a lot of miscommunication and frustration in the business community around critical infrastructure and essential employees. Victoria, can you take, oh, that was the timer. So I guess 4 minutes is probably a little too ambitious, but trying to give you all this background to facilitate your discussion. Victoria, can you give it just a quick update about that call this morning and just the disconnect and miscommunication around the critical infrastructure and essential employees?
Sure. So Teresa Foxley with EDC Utah is leading up this group. And this morning, Mayor Wilson of Salt Lake County got on the call to explain what was happening in the county. The county has basically prohibited some businesses from opening, particularly tattoo parlors, pretty much anything dealing with cosmetics, tanning, those sort of businesses. And then the other 2 categories are essential businesses and everyone else. And an essential business is asked to try and do the 6 feet apart and social distancing, but they can continue their operations even if they can't do that. All other businesses can remain open, but they are supposed to observe social distancing. The pushback or feedback that came back is, well, what if you own a business that's in multiple counties? Which counties restrictions apply? What if your employees don't live in the county but come in the county to work? Mayor Wilson recognized that there's disconnect between the state and various counties, and committed to working through that, but that was pretty much the extent of that conversation or any solutions to it.
Perfect. Thank you, Victoria. So let's talk about where we're going now and what our plan is as staff, and then we need your feedback if we're going in the right direction, and then what you can learn from each other and how we can help you and the cities in your region. So first is the CARES Act that Congress passed last week, $2.2 trillion. Some call it a stimulus, others call it replacement money. It's a little bit of both. From a local government perspective, here are really the 2 key pieces you need to know. Number 1 is that the package contemplates bridge money for local businesses, small businesses, and large businesses, but particularly for those small businesses where they can get a forgivable loan that will ideally help them cover their payroll, rent, utilities, and other costs through June. The SBA is frantically working this week. Their goal is by the end of the week to have the regulations in place so that they can start accepting applications next week and have the money start flowing. That money will indirectly help cities because we know of many cities that are considering or have already acted on not turning off utilities and this way you would still see some revenue eventually. We've heard from multiple cities around the state who are concerned that they could see a huge drop of revenue from that piece. The second piece that's critical for local governments is direct money. And that is approximately $1.5 billion that the state of Utah will receive. Keyword there is approximately. I've heard everything from $850 million to $1.5 billion. I'm being optimistic that we will indeed get the full $1.5 billion. That's the number Senator Romney referenced on the call last week as well. This $1.5 billion would be to reimburse state and local governments for direct costs related to COVID-19. Wayne or John Park, can one of you give a quick overview of the conversation we started last week with our COVID-19 fiscal task force?
Yeah, we met, this is John. We met last week with about 25 people on a Zoom call. And we asked them various questions concerning where they wanted to go, whether, I mean, it ranged from whether we wanted to request from the governor the opportunity to delay our budget process. And the consensus was that, why it would maybe be nice that's maybe not where we need to spend our political capital, that in as much as the state is going to meet in June to formalize their budget, to adjust their budget, that there was really no need for us to do anything else. Another outtake from that meeting, as we talked about trying to make a case for some of that money or other money that may be available, that we ought to sit down and work together to be able to have some common, a list of common tracking within the city. So we're going to try to, we have a task force, a sub-task force that, like I just sent an email out to them a minute ago, we're going to attempt to come up with a comprehensive list of things that city could track that are common throughout our organizations. Therefore, when we perhaps have an opportunity to have a discussion about some of these funds or other funds that may be available, we'd be ready with some kind of common goals. Anything else you want to add, Wayne?
Yeah, John covered it pretty well, but the message is that we want all the municipalities collecting the same information. So if and when we request from the governor to share some of that revenue, we're all on the same page about what that revenue should cover and how we can go about requesting that. We've also, and Cam can touch on this, but we're going to ask the counties to do the same thing so that we're all on the same page as local governments when it comes to justifying and requesting any of those federal funds that the state receives.
Thank you both. And one point of emphasis here is that the CARES Act is contemplating direct costs and reimbursements for those direct costs. So if you have additional sick leave costs or first responder shifts or anything that can be directly related to COVID-19, this bill creates this fund for the state and local governments to seek reimbursement. It is not a revenue replacement fund. I was on the phone with the director of NLC Friday night, and he indicated that NLC has already been meeting with several key senators about a fourth stimulus bill that would contemplate some form of revenue replacement, whether that's sales tax, property tax, TRT, you name it. He acknowledged that was going to be a few weeks out, but NLC is going to be putting together some research, and our fiscal task force will also be looking at the impacts, the indirect impacts of COVID-19 on local government revenues, so that we can participate in that dialogue as well. One interesting thing of note is the governor received a letter this morning from multiple area restaurants asking him to issue an executive order to delay the remittance of sales tax for the first quarter of calendar year 2020 in order to give businesses a bit of a reprieve for now. And in fact, former Governor John Huntsman suggested something similar in an op-ed a few days ago. So there, and then current Lieutenant Gubernatorial candidate John Dougal, current auditor, also has been suggesting that the state ought to create some sort of property tax waiver for businesses and individuals affected by COVID. So lots of moving parts out there, all of which will have a direct or indirect impact on local government. One interesting tidbit is that while a nonprofit can apply for this CARES reimbursement money, the state of Utah is setting up a program that they're announcing at 1 o'clock today. That's a $9 million program for local businesses, but that would not apply to nonprofits. Salt Lake City, Ogden, and the St. George area have all set up similar bridge programs for local businesses. And I told Val Hill this morning that we would gather other information from other cities that are looking at similar programs, and that we needed to have better communication from all of the different entities that are trying to help businesses to make it more of a one-stop shop for a local business to know what they need to do to potentially qualify for this type of relief. That leads then to the endless struggle around trying to coordinate between state and local governments and the general public about what's happening. And one issue that came up this morning in that task force call is that we have multiple different dates of when orders expire. We have other county health departments considering other orders, and we're still desperately trying to wrap our arms around a consistent message to the public. So with that being said, that was more than 4 minutes, but that gives you the background of where things are at, where they are now. Our questions to you are as follows. What do you need from each other, and what do the cities in your area need from the league? How can we best support you in week 3 and beyond? And does the plan that we've laid out here of what we're doing meet your needs, or are there other things you would like to see or like to see us not do?
And Cam, we had coordinated with Chair Mendenhall earlier about how we should go about these sections. And if you just want to look down next to participants on your meeting board, you should have a raise your hand option. And then you can just raise those. I can coordinate with Mike and we can get you unmuted. Okay, Mike has raised his hand. Can you see?
There was
Mike?
the test. Can you allow me to talk now, Nick?
But of course. Do you see the hands on your end, or do I need to coordinate that with you?
Yes. No, I can see it on my end. You have to click participants, and then a window pops up, and then you can raise a hand from that. I'm not sure how to unraise my hand. Just click the hand, and probably it doesn't. Oh, lower hand. All right, there we go. So raise hand, lower hand. Yep. So click the participants section down below Nick's beautiful face, and you'll see the option to raise your hand. And yeah, we'll just get to everybody that wants to speak to this. I can just tell you from a Spanish Fork experience, I appreciate all of you as member cities and the sharing of information that's already happened. There's been many things, many items we've used down here in Spanish Fork that have come from Salt Lake City, from Park City, from other areas of the state, and what you guys have done. So I appreciate that sharing of information, and obviously the overarching commonality is that we're members of the league and sharing that information with each other. So it would be nearly impossible to do that with each other without the great organization that we have, and Cam and Nick and Susan and everybody's work on keeping that all together. So I appreciate it. Next hand up is Mayor Mendenhall of Salt Lake. Go ahead, Mayor.
All right. Can you hear me now, cousin?
Yep.
I want to just start by offering out there anything else that Salt Lake City might have at our fingertips, or that our staff might have already put together. If there's any tools, whether it's the tracking methodology we're using through finance, anything else out there, the economic development work that I know we've already shared a great deal of that, but if you need anything from Salt Lake City, please reach out to me or reach out directly if you know our staff. We are here to help. I just wanted to bring up, I think Cam and Nick, league staff probably, and probably many of you mayors also have an email from Adam Gardner with Senator Romney's office that looks at how, if we use CDBG formula for the distribution of the COVID recovery first batch of money, how that plays out. And I want to advocate for us to ask for this formula of distribution. I think that during times like this, during times of crisis, or any time that there's a lack of trust, such as we've had with the inland port, that it's really important for us to use existing tools, trusted tools, and not try to invent new wheels under those circumstances. Our finance department is going to be going through the other financial distribution tools that happen between the feds, the state, and then to us as cities. And it may be such that some other approach would end up with a slightly different distribution, but I think time is of the essence right now, and I would advocate that we align with the Conference of Mayors, who's also asking for a CDBG formula of allocation, and go ahead and get this money rolling as fast as we can. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Mendenhall, can I just, in response to some of that anyway, first of all, thank you for sharing information that has helped a few of our cities with our small business resilience fund. We appreciate your help. I'm curious, as you've dealt with, and several of you in the virtual room here have worked with the state. I'm finding that the directive issued last Friday has enough holes in it, big enough holes in it, you can drive a truck through some of them. And I'm just curious, kind of I don't know what you would suggest, and who you would suggest we talk to as we try to maybe extend or go a little tighter on a couple of things based on your experience, who we should talk with as we sort of get that approval that it sounded like they wanted from the state.
Hi, John. It's good to see you. I think even some of those big trucks drove right through it with more than 10 people in the truck, and they parked at Snow Canyon over the weekend and had some fun recreation there in your city.
Yeah, we were hoping that wouldn't happen, but there were a lot of in-state and out-of-state cars there, and
saw that.
It's frankly, it's kind of discouraging.
I think I'm trying to be positive about what we worked with the state, and the positive side for me is that it allows us as cities to make to use that as a floor and to build up and above it with their permission. So I encourage you to always share with them what you're doing. And to be frank with you, from what I've experienced over the last week, they really need that. But I'm not going to be asking for permission as I go forward anymore. There were some things we agreed to on Friday morning that by the time the Friday press conference happened weren't there. And that's just, what it did was lead to more confusion, where the proclamation that we had drafted leading up to that I set aside so that I could work with the state, my proclamation had that clarity in it. So I appreciate Salt Lake County. I think that what the public health order they issued provides that clarity again. And so I think working with your county health department as much as you can to reflect what Summit and Salt Lake City County have done is the best path to go. That's just my opinion.
No, I'm grateful for it. My problem is I don't have Gary Edwards. I have someone who disagrees with a more proactive approach and has from day one. And he has his entire board. We have 5 counties involved, all rural. Ours is the least rural, but they do not want in fact, they're not happy about the initial directives that the governor gave. They're really unhappy about what happened Friday. So
have you had them on a call with Gary Edwards?
No, and I know Gary because if he's the same Gary, he used to be down here, if I remember right. And so I'm thinking I would like to talk with him about suggestions, because I really love our. We have a doctor who's over our Southwest Utah Public Health Department, but he just has a little bit more of a hands-off approach. And with his board, which are the county commissioners of these 5 counties, they agree with him, or he agrees with them. I'm not sure which. And it's probably means that a few of the cities that agree that it needs to be more proactive are going to have to push it and lead out on their own.
Mayor Pike, this is Cam, and this is very helpful feedback for us as to how we can help. Dave Church, can you give a quick synopsis of just where the authority lies between the health department and the city if St. George, under the non-binding directive the governor issued, if St. George wanted to act, what St. George could potentially do?
Yes, and let me just say, this is my legal opinion. I'm sure other lawyers might have a different one, and I appreciate this. Salt Lake City's lawyers are looked at this probably in more detail than I have. But from what I've looked at, I really think that the key is to get your Board of Health on board and issue the order. The way I read the code and the way I read the governor's power under the Emergency Act and the way I read the proclamation, I think that Mayor Mendenhall is right that it's not bad to be more aggressive than the state, push it as far as we can. But I think if you're worried about the legal risk of someone challenging, if you try to enforce and someone challenging you, I think you won't be on as firm a foundation as normally I would like to see you on if your Board of Health is not on board with you, if that makes sense. What Salt Lake County did up here gave what Salt Lake City did the legal basis to enforce, in my opinion. And the way the governor, as I understand it, has written it, he thinks that if we are going beyond what his order is, that we only are doing so, as I read it, in conjunction with our boards of health. And unfortunately, the state code mandates that we participate in those boards of health, that we don't have our own boards of health. But that's the best I can do. That's not to say that I don't think it might not be worth pushing for in specialized circumstances as far as we dare push.
Well, that's what we'll have to do, David, because our Board of Health is not going to budge.
John, this is Miley.
Hi, Mayor.
If you want to have a call, I would be happy to be on that call because, as you know, we are one and the same.
Yes, we are.
And our commissioners are the ones that drafted the letter that went to the governor.
Yep.
So you know what's going on here as well.
I do. I will give you a call.
Okay.
And I think Mayor Mendenhall's right. I think maybe if we could help facilitate a call between a few of us mayors that do agree, we need to maybe take some further steps, or at least what he is going to do. Because at this point, I'm not even sure he's planning to issue directives to, for example, gyms. We've got gyms still open, some closed, some open, and it's because he hasn't directed anybody. So maybe if we can get Dr. Blodgett and Gary Edwards from Salt Lake Health Department to, and then a few mayors on the phone, maybe we can get off dead center.
Yeah. Every time I've talked to Dr. Blodgett, it's kind of a joke. We want to do the least that we can do and not ruffle any feathers.
That's right. Sorry, Cameron and everybody, but that is reality in Washington and Iron County.
Thanks, Mayor Pike.
No, that's good to know, because that helps us up here understand why the governor acted the way he did. I'm curious, for those of you in cities in Weber, Davis, and Utah counties, if you have had good coordination with your health departments, or if there's a disconnect, and if so, maybe if there are any lessons from those of you in Salt Lake County that you want to share with your fellow cities, either for good or for bad.
I have next hand up. I have Mayor Niehaus of Moab, then Mayor Silverstrini of Mill Creek, and then Mayor Kafusi of Provo. So let's go to Mayor Niehaus first, and then we'll go to Mayor Silverstrini.
So I just wanted to say thank you to Aaron and Andy for sharing information, and we were able to take information from both of you and implement some things here in Moab. But speaking to you, Mayor Pike, I've got a lot of sympathy for you. When the governor came out with his directive on Friday, we were all like, in Moab, we were like, oh, we're there, we're good, because we had taken preventative steps. And now we have one case, and it feels like you're just like a couple of weeks behind us and like 17 cases ahead of us in terms of this pandemic. And I would be very willing to be, a support to you and Miley and others to get your health department information. So my health department is amazing. We have, they're actually the chair of our COVID task force for Grand County. And they're actually located, the department is located in Price. So we've got a local guy here in Moab, Orion, that has just been very adamant in protecting public health ahead of businesses and economic health. But our first big order from our health department was the closure of our hotels. And that was like the game changer for us in terms of prevention. And it was in response to seeing the closure of the ski resorts. And if we're looking at the data in the New York Times article in particular about how tourism and visitation is what's creating the hotbeds for coronavirus, that's a lot of, good data to be presenting to your health department right now. So I guess what I want to say to you is, to all of you, thanks for those of you that have been helping me in coordinating efforts here. We've closed our playgrounds. But to you all down in the southwest corner, I'm here to help and help with advocacy. The way that so you may know that Arches and Canyonlands are now closed. And the way that came about was that we had all been talking, so me, the hospital, the health department, and the superintendent of Arches and Canyonlands, we had all been talking about how we can just keep people from coming to Moab right now. And so we were really going back and forth about whether or not we wanted to close the parks because we knew locals wanted to go hike. But ultimately, the superintendent said, I really just want to take care of the people that are working here as much as I want to take care of the health of the community as well. The health department said, all right, well, what do we need to do? And it was the health department that wrote the letter first. And then I wrote my letter, and then the superintendent was able to use that as leverage to close the park. So my health department has been the absolute lead, and whatever effort we can do to align the health departments and get them talking, maybe that would be the most helpful. But I just, my heart goes out to you because it's scary. I mean, it's chilling to walk downtown in Moab and see nothing open, but it's terrifying to, you know, think of the health implications of all of this.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Silvestrini.
Thank you. I assume you guys can hear me. So the first thing I want to say is thank you to Mayor Mendenhall and to Mayor Wilson for the work that they did with the state. You know, a lot of us have had people contacting us, medical people suggesting that this was the appropriate step, and particularly in the view of some of the crazy stuff that's been going on. I know we had our first test of the emergency order in Canyon Rim Park last night with a football game going on with a bunch of teenagers, and you know, so some people just aren't getting this. But in the Department of crossing or dotting I's and crossing T's, particularly for those jurisdictions in Salt Lake County that are under this emergency order, one of the things that is unclear, as pointed out to me by my police chief and city attorney, is whether local law enforcement agencies have the ability to enforce the county's order. And so I'm issuing a directive under our emergency declaration to give our precinct of the Unified Police authority to enforce the county's emergency order. And I recommend that other jurisdictions do that as well, just so that if you do want to enforce, there's legal protection for doing that. It's just something to think about. I know that, you know, we have a number of different police agencies in Salt Lake County anyway, and they probably need that gap bridge so that they are in the clear. Hopefully they won't have to be issuing citations, but even, you know, if they do, you know, if we have people that are clearly violating it, I guess we have to back this up now that we've gone that far to have an emergency order. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Kafusi, you're up next, and then Mayor Fulmer.
Hi. I just wanted to respond to the answer of how your county health department is working with you. Down here in Utah County, and I don't know if Chair Mendenhall has felt this, we felt a little disconnect to our county health department. We were a little baffled. I believe it was Friday when their latest post was a girl with headphones on, and they suggested take your headphones off because it might hurt your hearing someday. So we've been struggling, I'm not gonna lie, with getting information pushed out, with the Daily Universe announcing a student tested positive to COVID-19, and we called over to their office and they wouldn't give us information. And then a week later, it comes back that it was true. So there's been a huge disconnect, and I haven't looked today, but someone just texted me and said that it looks like they posted something today, but we do need some help on getting our county health department to get a little more engaged and give us updates. I know everything's confidential, but we just, we're struggling. And I too will add my voice to those that were expecting a much more, I wouldn't say harsh, but a different directive than what came out from the governor. We had met Friday morning expecting this and had a plan in place for stricter regulations and whatnot, and then felt like, I mean, this is just how I felt like. It's kind of sounded like the dad saying, damn it, I mean it this time, was kind of how it came across to me. But so we're collaborating right now, trying to figure out next steps for the city of Provo. And maybe I said too much, but would love any feedback or suggestions, or if someone in Utah County is hearing from Ralph Klug in the county health department, let me know how, and I'd love to get in on that.
Agreed, Mayor Kafusi. Mayor Fulmer, you're in Utah County. Is that along the lines of something you were talking about, or something different?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I felt similarly with the lack of communication. I know today on the call at 10:30, they mentioned that they were going to try to do better at this with communicating, but we did call in several times just so that we could post something in coordination with what the governor said. A lot of our residents obviously sit on both sides of wanting to be proactive or wanting to be less proactive, but just a unified, clear message would be nice, even if all they wanted to do was just put out a voice that said, yes, we feel like this baseline is where the county is at. Without the county having that description at all, it makes it a more difficult conversation. So I was happy to hear they were starting to realize that conversation was difficult, but I think it's a perpetual discussion that we have at our county level. And so it was nice to hear that they are also going to be coordinating with the other counties around the state to try to get on the same page.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Mayor Niehaus.
I just wonder if it would be effective, because I feel like I'm kind of like going backwards in my brain. Like, why has my health department been so proactive? And I think it's because we all sat in a room before there was no sitting in a room. And we said, we're going to support whatever measures you take. We've got your back. We're all together. And it was, we're smaller, and so we were able to get all of the players together in a room to be able to give this message. But I feel like the health department needed to hear from us that in a unified voice that we supported measures like closing the lodging here in Moab. And so I wonder if, it sounds like, I was curious actually among our board if some of you felt like the measures were too much, or if we were all on the same page in terms of putting health, first. So I just wonder if there could be a coordinated effort of all mayors in, that are within a district to write a letter in support of stricter measures from the health department, knowing then that letter to support them would then be the, maybe the change in the health department to move it forward.
In Davis County, they have begun a conference call, Zoom call, with the mayors and managers. We had one after the governor's press conference. We've got another one today at 4, which was really helpful. I think having both an elected representative and a staff member has been really good for getting the water down the row. But that's something I might suggest for those who are struggling with their health departments is go to the commissioners or the health department or your health district and get on a regular call. Just set something up so that you can vet your issues. That's been very good in Davis County.
Gary, I'll jump in there. We're doing the same thing. We have a 3:30 conference call with the PIOs of all the hospitals, our 911 district, and our public safety agencies to all get on the same page and make sure we're all on the same sheet of music. So that's something that I think brings accountability across all of those critical and essential service areas. And we have a standing one every single day at 3:30.
We're doing one 2 to 3 times a week with all of our mayors. We've invited the county commissioners and other stakeholders like the health department director, university president, the hospital CEO, kind of whoever, Department of Workforce Services. Anyway, it's been great, but it hasn't translated yet. to support for more aggressive action. So I think what I'm hearing from several of you, that's just what we're going to have to do. And frankly, I think we're getting there. We've got 4 or 5 of our, quote, bigger city mayors. Most of you can laugh at that, but St. George, Hurricane, Washington, Santa Clara, and Ivans are what we call our big 5. And if we can get them on board and saying, hey, this is what we need to do, health department, maybe we can turn the tide. But without being lock, stock, and barrel, what we have is I become the socialist mayor. Now you can all laugh because I've closed our 4 public golf courses, closed our park playgrounds, and other things. And so I am now the socialist mayor. So we got to be more together so that we can, and frankly, it would really help us to have our public health department leading out, or at least standing there with us.
President, can I jump in here?
Yeah, go ahead, Cam.
I just got confirmation that Jill Parker, who was going to join us at noon, can join us in about 10 minutes. So my suggestion would be for Mayor Pike or Mayor Wilson-Edwards, one of you, to bring up your concern. Mayor Silvestrini, your point about law enforcement is a really good one, because I've heard mixed messages there over what county health departments and counties are expecting from cities on law enforcement. And then someone from Utah County bring up the general concern around the lack of coordination there and how that's confusing to the general public. So, President, if that's all right with you, I think let's suspend the health department conversation for 10 to 15 minutes until Jill gets on, and then we can ask these questions of her and see if she can help try to move the ball forward on these issues.
Perfect. Sounds good.
So my other question for board members is, what else can we do as league staff to help you? I laid out the plan that we've been working on over the last couple of weeks, and so are there things you'd like to see us do? Are there things on that plan that you don't think we necessarily need to do? This is where we really need some just general or some specific direction from you so that we can engage accordingly in the days to come.
Mayor Talbot, I see your hand up. I see Mayor Caldwell's as well. Is that something that you wanted to speak to as well, in what else the league can do to further the effort?
Oh, I spoke my piece. I'm good.
Okay. Mayor Talbot?
It looks like you are unmuted from this end, Mayor Talbot, so you may just want to check on yours. If you're on a phone, you can do it with *6.
Well, oh, there you go. You up now, Mayor?
Oh, and now it looks like you are muted on this end. Can we hear you now, Mayor?
Hop on if you get that figured out, Mayor. From my side, and this is maybe something bringing up to Jill when we get her on the call in just a minute, but apparently from Spanish Fork City side, the connection between the county health department and our city has been with the public safety, so with our police and EMS, and maybe Mayor Capusi, maybe that's similar in your area. I'm not sure, but if there's no city manager or elected official on those, that certainly seems like a disconnect to me of maybe playing one one more step of what telephone that you don't have to play. Definitely elected officials and city managers should be on those calls, so they're the ones that are getting the phone calls first, right? When people think one way or the other about our policies that we're instituting. I don't see anyone else's hands up.
So, President, here's a potential idea: is we could put together a letter on behalf of the entire board to send to all the local health departments, urging coordination in the ways that you have brought up today. That way, the letter would go to all of the health departments, including the ones that have already issued orders, Salt Lake, Summit, and now Wasatch. Would that be helpful? Would that be redundant? You guys, you guys tell us if you think something like that would be helpful or not.
Would it be coordination and also with the effort for deeper orders, more protective orders? Would that be helpful to the board members that are feeling the concern?
The one thing I worry about that, Mayor Niehaus, is that of our 249 cities and towns, I don't know where each of our 1,385 mayors and council members are about potential stricter regulation. And so maybe that's a conversation for the board here, is does the board want to say something like that in the letter, or does the board want to just urge health departments to improve coordination, or is this something that we just shouldn't do and just leave it to the local cities and the local health departments to work through their issues?
I think on the coordination, I would fully support something encouraging that. On the enforcement, it does get trickier. But I think, just having a more aggressive approach, and even as Mayor Mendenhall did, having the force of law, at least it sends a signal, that if we need to, we can. Didn't you do that, Mayor Mendenhall? As I recall, one of your, maybe can't remember, fourth or fifth one did that, or maybe sooner, in terms of your directives.
To have the force of law with it, you mean?
Yeah.
Any proclamation made by the city has the force of law. A Class B misdemeanor for violation.
And I was reading in the press, how are you currently enforcing it, or is it just you're hoping that will be enough?
We're hoping that will be enough. I just in the proclamation signed last night suspended all of our parking enforcement.
Saw that.
And so we're reallocating, sort of redirecting our parking enforcement staff to go to public spaces and remind people and encourage people. Our police officers really don't want to enforce this. I just saw a tweet that a guy in Maryland was arrested for hosting a bonfire with over 60 people last night and violating Maryland's no more than 10 people. So I think it's going to start happening, and people are going to do it on purpose. We're prepared to deal with that when it happens, but right now our police officers are not out there writing tickets.
Gotcha.
Mayor Bierman, your hand is up. Let us know. I know some of us have spoken, communicated with you, but let the group know what you're doing up there.
Thanks, Mike. Hopefully things are starting to stabilize here. We've had a shelter-in-place order in for a little over a week, and people are adjusting to it, and we've been fine-tuning. And fortunately, we've had a really good relationship with our health board and been having daily meetings. But under the category of lessons learned, I'm curious how many of you have council members or key staffer yourselves on your local health boards? Just raise a hand if you do. Not many. it looks like. I only asked because until 2 years ago, we were always given a seat on our local health board. And then recently the county removed us. And at the time, we didn't think that was a big deal. But looking forward, lessons learned from this, I really think it's important we work with those health boards and potentially the state to make sure we do get a future seat on those boards. So situations like this, the communication's open.
Yep, I agree. Feels
Good
kind
point.
of, at least in our case, like an antiquated system.
Cam, do we have our guest with us yet, or do you want to move on
Jill,
to something else?
yeah, I don't see Jill on the call yet. So I'll ask my question one last time. Is there anything else that people want to see from league staff, or any other way that we can be helpful? We've outlined to you our plan of attack for now, and if people are comfortable with that, that's what we'll continue doing. Mayor Pike, we had talked to you about the resort community issue, but let us know now, or otherwise we'll just continue with the plan that we've laid out.
Yeah, I don't know, Cameron, how feasible it would be, but maybe in a day or two, I'll know better what we want to do. But for example, if some resort cities like Moab and Park City, St. George, Springdale up in our neck of the woods as well, maybe others, maybe Cedar City, Boulder City, Garden City were some that Cameron and I had talked about. If there's some that kind of view themselves in that kind of that risk of having lots of visitors, that we need to send a combined message that, hey, we love you, but now's not the time, to come. Mayor Niehaus has already solved a lot of that problem, I would guess. We haven't. Maybe we'll be able to yet, but if not, we might need to form a very positive sounding message, but one that nevertheless kind of delivers that message that this is the time to stay safe and stay home.
I do think that working with GoEd, and in particular with Vicki, with the Office of Tourism and the Office of Outdoor Recreation, that's been really effective for me. And it might take, I don't know how, what your relationship is with Vicki, but
we know her.
Yeah, but you personally, to just give her a call.
Yeah, I could. Again, on the local level, we have a problem because that's done under the direction of the county commission. So, we'd have to kind of get both the county and the state, Vicki, on board. So we can try that.
Just a quick question. Are you, maybe you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but it would be interesting to know what your thoughts are about keeping Zion open or closing Zion.
Yeah, I was really jealous when your parks closed. Our county commissioners have a very close relationship with our superintendent of Zion. So same problem.
Yeah.
We got a couple more hands.
Joe? No, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, really quick. Let's see, Jeff Young and Don Christensen. Jeff, if you'd like to go first.
You bet, thanks. One of the things that I reached out to a bunch of the smaller communities, and there was a lot of apprehension about anything that would put them more strict than what the state and local health officials are helping us with, mostly because there's physically no way to even follow through on any additional mandate. And so the main concern was trying to make sure that the areas that aren't tourist areas, as well as but are still smaller areas, still are able to work with the state at the level that they recommend, but not go further. But they all had and were in favor of additional information being sent out to help other local communities. For example, sending out to their communities saying, hey, please be respectful of areas such as Moab or other ones that would be able to tighten theirs and respect that. And so I think maybe a combination without having to pressure the smaller ones to enforce something more strict, but still allow them to get word out so we can be respectful and mindful of the other communities.
Thanks, Jeff. That's a good item to share with the cities of similar size. Don?
Yes,
Don,
I just wanted to go back to Cameron's question about how the league is doing and what they can do more. I texted my staff this morning and they said league has been great. Cam, wonderfully helpful over the last few days. Wanted you to be able to pass on to the board how great Cam and his staff have been. So I think, Cam, what we're saying is keep up the good work and keep along on exactly what you're doing so far.
Perfect. Well, thank you, council member, and we'll proceed as we've been going. And thank you for the kind words. And President, Jill is now on the call.
Great. Thank you, Jill, for joining us. We appreciate your time. You have the on this Zoom call, you have the board of directors of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, mayors and council members, and city managers from all across the state, different shapes and sizes of cities. Obviously trying to navigate the best we can the situations that are facing all of our communities. If you'd like to go ahead and take a second to introduce yourself, I'm sure we'll have some questions for you.
Thank you. Cam, I'm assuming that was directed at me. I got disconnected for a minute.
Yep, you're good. You're good. My President Mike Mendenhall of Spanish Fork just introduced you, and then
Hi,
I gave
Mike.
the background. I gave your background once I knew you were going to be able to join us. So we've got you for about 10 minutes, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. And
No
we've
pressure.
got a few questions that have come up during the meeting around health department coordination. So
Okay.
Jill, I'll turn it to you to give an update, and then some of these questions will get asked.
Okay, thank you for allowing me to hop on for just a minute. So my name is Jill Parker. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Local Health Departments. As you're aware, there are 13 local health departments across the state. And it's been a pleasure being able to work with Cam. He mentioned that there were a few questions. We also work with Brandy Grace with UAC. As you can imagine, our health officers are working long days, 7 days a week. I'm sure it feels like to them around the clock, trying to get the best information they can out, but it sounds like there are some gaps, some things that we are missing. Cameron mentioned that there were some questions. So maybe without me taking more time, I will just turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Jill. Mayor Pike down in St. George, did you want to start off?
Holy cow. Well, we've been spending quite a bit of time on this, so I'll just try to be succinct. We are just feeling regarding the cities in the Washington County and Iron County area. I'll let Mayor Miley Wilson Edwards speak for herself. We're feeling that our health department director is not taking an aggressive enough approach. And we are meeting with him, all the mayors and the commissioners from our county, at least twice a week for the last few weeks, sometimes 3 times. He usually participates, but he has minimized the need for social distancing. He's now kind of, okay, maybe we should. And this guy's a physician. I really like him and I respect him, but it's killing us because we can't do anything. Even after Friday, I don't know what he's going to shut down, if anything, in terms of gyms, because partially, I don't know what's him and what's the commissioners. We have a very conservative group of counties in our 5-county region. So Iron County, Beaver County, Washington County, Kane County, Garfield County. We don't have any representation that I'm aware of as cities on that board. And so we've tried to, nudge and push and hoped that, they would be the ones doing that, but there's just been nothing. And so we're frustrated. It feels like we're alone, especially a couple of the, larger cities. And I know we're a small county, but we've got Ivins, Santa Clara, and St. George in particular that are kind of the ones that are the most concerned and are closing down our public parks, or at least the playgrounds. I've closed down all 4 of our golf courses, our bike park, our skateboard park, a few things like that, our swimming pool, our indoor swimming pool, our rec center. And because we have zero support from the health department, we're basically labeled, I'm basically labeled as the socialist mayor. So we've kind of got people on the one side that are saying, come on, Pike, you got to do more. You guys got to shut this down. Get the governor, get somebody, shut this place down. And then you got on the other side, you got our more conservative wing, if you will, that are saying, you guys don't get it. You're taking advantage of the people, and this is unconstitutional. And frankly, as our own council says, David Church on this call, and my own city attorney says, we've got to be careful because, what legal ability do we have to do certain things? So frankly, we're very frustrated.
Mayor, thank you for sharing that with me. I can empathize with your frustration. There are our local health departments feel that on a statewide level. I'd like to speak to you a little more offline and maybe connect you back to Dr. Blodgett. But that part about feeling like you have one side that is pushing you to do more and one side that is judging you for doing anything, like that is a really fine balance between keeping our economy going and allowing for good public health measure. The governor on Friday left it in some instances to local health departments to look at the data in their communities. We're getting better data as more testing comes online. We'll have more testing coming online. I found out this morning they're looking at standing up 3,000 additional tests in the next few days per day. The governor, GOMB, is giving local health departments support related to contact tracing so that we can expand our capacity as more of these tests come online. So the more data we get, the more informed we are and the better decisions we can make. But in regards to the frustration specifically to your health officer, if we could connect offline, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Can you write down my cell, and then maybe we can visit with Mayor Wilson Edwards as well. My cell is 435-632-6892.
Okay. Thank you.
And now your social security number?
52, no.
Thank you, Jill. Hey, while we have you just for a few more minutes, just a couple of more pieces. In Utah County, Spanish Fork, where I'm at, and Mayor Kafusi of Provo, represented on this call, along with Mayor Fulmer of Vineyard, have expressed frustration between the disconnect between our cities and the county health department, with regular updates and a solid message, a coherent message together for our residents. I've learned in my community, the regular calls are invited and attended by our police force and our EMS, but none of our elected officials or the city manager in Spanish Fork are invited to those calls. And so maybe that's a step that could be taken, whereas the residents, when they're confused or frustrated about something, usually they're calling the city first, not our police department and not the EMS, but they're calling city manager or an elected official and asking questions about it. So there might be more that Mayor Kafusi has and Mayor Fulmer has to that. But in the limited time we have with you, I'd like Mayor Silverstrini from Mill Creek to bring up his question about the disconnect they're having possibly with law enforcement, with enforcing the rule up there in Mill Creek. Mayor, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't know if it's a disconnect, but one of my concerns, one of our city attorney's concerns, and our police chief's concerns was extending the authority, to enforce the Salt Lake County directive into our local jurisdiction, because something actually Mayor Wilson mentioned, that she couldn't enforce this, but it may be up to each separate police department to actually have enforce this. So I've already issued a directive under our state of emergency order today that authorizes our unified police precinct and all post-certified officers to enforce the county health directive in Mill Creek, and also authorizes our justice court to prosecute citations that may be issued there under. So I just think that may be, and maybe you have a view on this, Joe, but I think it's just a legal technicality to make sure that we don't get faced with an issue where somebody says that, well, the county issued a health order, but there is no authority to enforce it.
Yes, and I'm not as connected specifically with what Salt Lake County is doing, although I did keep up with it with Gary Edwards over the weekend, and the enforcement piece that Mayor Wilson had put into place. That's a very good point, and that's so you're aware, and I'm not speaking to Salt Lake County specifically, but statewide, when there's an order put into place, this happened with the governor's first order. When an order is put into place, there has to be an enforcement component to it. That's part of it being an order instead of a directive. There has been pushback to local health departments kind of from a variety of different avenues that have been pushing back, saying that there should not be enforcement. Again, the authority of local health departments is when there is an order put in place, there has to be an enforcement component associated with it. Otherwise, it's a directive. And so I think, Mayor Silverstein, what you bring up is exactly what we need to be addressing, and it's becoming difficult. I don't know if there's a mayor from Summit County on, and maybe they can speak to this. I understand there's been some concern related to enforcement of the state shelter in place. I have a call actually with Rich a little bit later today, but that it's been taxing on law enforcement. So again, it's finding that balance. But Mayor, are you connected into the Emergency Operations Center with Salt Lake County with Mayor Wilson and Gary Edwards?
Yes, we are. And,
okay.
For other mayors that outside of Salt Lake County, we do have a periodic conference with our, what we call Salt Lake County Unified Command, which is basically the mayor, the health department, and some administrative people. So we have regular calls like that. We had one actually yesterday before Mayor Wilson and the Unified Command issued this health order. So we are communicating on that, which is a good thing. I frankly hope that health departments across the state will communicate better. And while we've had some calls with the Lieutenant Governor, one of the things I would like to see is better coordination between state and local governments. I think we kind of addressed that on Friday with the governor, but I think that's been part of the issue about, better communication. So, we're all on the same page. And the worst thing that we can do is be having confusion or countermanding each other's orders. That just is that's a disaster in terms of getting people to do the thing that they need to do.
Absolutely. And related to the order on Friday, we had the order, we found out about that on the call with 500 people the same time you did. We did not have information before, so you can imagine the scrambling. Mayor, who is leading the conversation? I'm so sorry. Your name comes up as Mike, but that seems a little disrespectful.
Mike Mendenhall, Councilman Mendenhall, and there's a lot more disrespectful things that I've answered to, so just say anything.
Okay, thank you. Kind of going back to the question that you had, and maybe Cameron, you can gather this from your membership. So there are conversations that happen on a regular basis, just as Mayor Silvestrini just mentioned, related to incident command communicating back to cities and towns. today on a call, this morning on a call, we have a stand-up call twice a week with Utah Department of Health and the local health officers in preparation for this call and knowing some of the frustration out of Utah County. And we can talk about that a little bit more. And I'm going to connect their health officer back to Cameron here this morning or this afternoon. But one of the things that maybe we can do, Cameron, and you and I can talk about this offline, is every county has some piece of public information that's going either to emergency management or to their EOC in their communities. There's no reason that information, I just don't think that I think health departments are running so fast right now and trying to man around the clock 7 days a week related to cases and contact tracing. I appreciate this call because I think some things have fallen through the cracks. And so what I would like to do, if there's a way that we can connect, it will be by health district. So we have 13 across the state, as you're aware, but if they can connect the elected officials into that information that they're sending out, so you're getting it to your inbox specific for your county, I'm thinking that would be helpful. Am I correct in that assumption?
It would be tremendously helpful.
Absolutely.
Yep, that would be great.
Okay, when we have our health officer call tonight, we'll talk a little bit about what that structure will look like and then connect back to Cameron. Even if I'm sending it to him and he's sending it to the membership or they're adding you to their listserv, we'll find a way to do that. I can't promise it will happen by this afternoon, but I can promise that I will work on it to make it happen.
Terrific. Thank you, Jill. And feel free to call me tonight or tomorrow anytime and we can figure out that next step. The good news is we have a massive email listserv and our board consists of mayors and council members in every health district in the state. So between the board, our listserv and other channels, we can help facilitate that communication.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on the call. I'm sorry that I only had a few minutes, but if you have additional questions and want to get those to Cameron, he can communicate those with me at a later time.
Thank you, Jill. We appreciate your time and we'll get those questions to Cam so we can get them to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone. That was helpful for us as staff to hear and certainly seemed like it was helpful for you to have that dialogue. In the next 40 minutes, we have some other business we need to get to, some of which is affected by COVID. So President, with that, are you comfortable moving to the next item?
Yes, the next item, trying to pick up off where Mayor Caldwell pinch hit for me.
Yeah, it's the budgetary 6. Impacts. Yep.
Okay.
You'll see a memo in your packet that Nick prepared that articulates the budgetary impacts of COVID-19 on our current fiscal year, which is the cancellation of mid-year. Nick, can you take a moment and just hit the highlights of your memo?
Yeah, so as we're all aware, the biggest direct and immediate impact of the COVID-19 ongoing situation is cancellation of mid-year. Overall, that affects us by losing roughly just a little under $200K in expected revenue. Last year, along with that, we have all of our expenses that go along with mid-year that we won't incur as well. So between last year, we spent a little over $155,000 in those direct categories. So we should be able to absorb some of that cost there. However, we do make money on mid-year usually, and we were expecting to make more in the exhibitor category, particular by expanding. So we will miss out on that revenue. What is perhaps the biggest concern is the fact that the value to our sponsors of our sponsorship program goes down significantly for this fiscal year. Our sponsors sign on for a calendar year, not our fiscal year. So within this year that they're signing up for, we have the two major events, mid-year and annual. Half of those events have now been canceled for them. So we've worked to try and find other value for our sponsors. The stuff they really want is the in-person meeting with you guys. However, we're giving them some free ads in our directory this year. and we're going to work continuously. Cam mentioned at the beginning of the call that we've had plenty of outreach with our sponsors, but without having an in-person meeting, that does kind of make it less valuable for them to give us the money for sponsorship. We do have later in the meeting the projected dues with last year's formula applied to this year's factors for cities. We tried to get those out to you as fast as possible so you can start making those decisions. The biggest thing when we're looking—
So Nick, can I jump in there real quick? Before we move on to dues, is everybody on the same page of just what canceling mid-year will mean to this current fiscal year? So when you get at our next meeting, when you see Q3, and then as we wrap up the year, just like you're seeing in your cities with sales tax revenue shortfalls and other things, we'll see a big revenue hit as well. So just want to make sure everybody's on the same page there. Okay.
Absolutely.
So then President Mendenhall, let me just jump into dues here real quickly. This meeting is not to adopt the dues. Historically, we would not have a board meeting in March. We would just have a board meeting in April, and we would talk through all the priorities for the year, and then we'd give you the dues formula broken down by city, and you would adopt the dues at the same time we were having the priority discussion. So when President Mendenhall and I sat down in August to lay out the upcoming year, we thought it made sense to have that priorities discussion in March before you adopted the dues, give you a tentative look at the dues, and then you adopt them in April. Obviously, COVID consumed most of our time today, but what you see before you in the dues section is a draft, emphasis on the keyword there of draft, of what holding the rates constant would mean in fiscal year 2021. Our external financial folks have not double-checked these numbers, so the main point of emphasis here is if you wanted the rate to stay the same, and the rate has stayed the same since 2015, and every year I've been director, we've maintained the rates the same, the rate would generate additional revenue of more than $100,000. That's because unlike when a city is working on its upcoming budget and a city's projecting what revenue will look like, we are looking backward and running a calculation based on property valuation, population, and sales tax from the year before, and then you run the formula, and that becomes the dues calculation. Obviously, COVID has complicated the fiscal outlook for a lot of communities looking forward. And that's why we wanted to get direction from you about the rate now before we prepared the final numbers for you to approve and to get out to our cities in April. President Mendenhall, one thing I want to bring up is we've given you this draft of city by city, again, draft numbers, but if we went through and looked at all the cities that if you ran the formula at its current rate, who would see an increase of 7% or more, and who would see an increase of $1,000 or more. And again, it's not that the dues formula is increasing, it's that the amount would increase over last year. And so we went through, and we've got that analysis if people want to talk about what cities are on that list. But President, I'll turn it over to you for discussion around whether the board wants to maintain the current rates or wants to proceed in a different direction.
Thank you, Cam. So let's have a discussion on this. If anybody has any questions or concerns, advice, again, when talking to Cameron about this, the timing of something, that we're all going to be looking at our respective budgets in our cities as the economic impacts of something that none of us could have anticipated has come to be, and the dues are obviously looking backwards a year when things were good and our revenues were good, or populations and so forth. So for me personally, I'll just start out to reiterate what Don Christensen has already said in this meeting If you, and this should include our fellow elected officials in our respective cities, if you have not seen the value of the league before now, I think the last 2.5, 3 weeks should have completely convinced you of such. And so, at least for the discussion, the quick discussion that I've had with the multiple colleagues in my city, obviously we get more than well worth our membership to the league, and especially the coordination when it's come to a crisis and crisis management and communicating clearly and effectively out to us, but also that communication link back to state government, back to county government. Cameron, Nick, Susan, Victoria, John, everybody else that I haven't named, but they have just stepped up in so many big ways for our city personally. But I hope you've seen that in your cities as well. Mayor Caldwell, I've got your hand up, and then Gary Hill, I've got your hand up. Mayor Caldwell, let's go to you first.
President, I appreciate that endorsement of what the league's done. I completely agree with that. It's been amazing. I do want to know, however, if Kim's planning to do truth and taxation hearings in all 248 cities.
I don't think I would survive the truth and taxation here in every city. You do raise, the comments said somewhat in jest, but you do raise that interesting point. Our formula does not go through any sort of truth and taxation type process. I mean, it's up to you to determine how to proceed. One thing I will add, though, is that a year from now, when we're having this conversation, we will see a big drop in dues simply because of what's going on with sales tax right now. We'll just see it later in the budgeting process. Because again, right now we look backward, but that's why we wanted to have a conversation now before the April meeting when you adopt dues to make sure we were all on the same page.
All I wanted to see was your face go a little red.
Gary?
Mike, I don't have anything. It was for an earlier issue, and I had my question answered. Thanks.
Gary, come on. I mean,
if everybody wants, I can draw a picture if everybody wants, but.
Listen, I have assisted with homeschooling, and I've started to make the 2 Mendenhall kids raise their hand when they want to speak. And I've said, how about we just raise your hand when you want to do anything in this house from now on, or else you're getting your name written on the board. Let's see, who else did I have? I've got nobody else's hands up. Anybody else have anything to speak to this? Again, we're not adopting this today, but we are looking for some recommendation, as we will look to adopt the dues next month with some minor adjustments, as Kim mentioned, to some of the numbers that came out a little squirrely for a couple of cities. Mayor Harvey?
My only thought is, with what's going on, there will probably be some cities that aren't going to renew. And we may want to look at scrutinizing our expenditures very closely. Because even if we keep our rates where they are, I don't know that we can truly expect to get everything we're projecting.
Appreciate that. Mayor Silverstrini, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would love to be able to sign off on this. I think that this group, the board of the league, are the most committed and maybe recognize the value of the league's work, more than maybe other members. So it's really, I think Mayor Araby's right. We need to be looking at how we can cut back if we have to, because if people don't renew, that'll be a problem, as it'll be a further problem, I guess. But it's really hard for any of us to give a commitment when we just don't have, we're just in such unknown territory about what our revenues are going to be. I'd like to think that we can all afford these amounts, but I just don't know yet. It's hard.
Well, Mayor Silvestrini, Mayor Harvey, this is Cam again, and this is exactly why we wanted to plant the seed today. And if from a budget scrutiny perspective, we've been working on that the last few weeks. Frankly, before we even canceled mid-year, we were already working through what that would mean for this fiscal year, but also if sponsors cut back, and we already know of 2 that have cut back substantially because of the economic uncertainty. Any cutback by sponsors affects the next fiscal year. So we are already working through the budget to narrow and cut and try to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible, since 2/3 of our money comes from our member cities. The biggest concern that I have as a director is when we look backward, we want to make sure we capture the growth in the economy before the inevitable decline, because we always see the decline for a year longer than cities do, and cities see the decline for a year longer than the private sector does, just by just by how things are set up. So if your instructions are to proceed with the current rates, but be able to come back and say, here's how we're cutting our budget, and that would give some comfort to cities who are going to be making really tough decisions this spring, done. If your direction is to revisit the rates, done. I mean, really, we just need to know from you so we can plan accordingly in the next couple of weeks before the April meeting.
This is Miley. I can't actually figure out how to raise my hand, so I hope you can hear me.
You're good, Mayor. I won't write your name on the board.
Perfect. I can just say, at least going with our council and with my city staff, the thought of a rate increase, which is what Cedar would have right now, it's going to be a very hard sell, because where we're looking at trying to scale back our own budget, and with all the uncertainty, they're going to have a hard time with any types of rate increases from organizations right now. So I think it's going to be, with all the uncertainty going on right now, is a really hard time to push for increases in different cities.
Thank you, Mayor Mendenhall of Salt Lake.
Thanks. I wonder if we could ask staff to come back with perhaps a phased approach of that's the course that I'm going to be taking with our budget in the coming months. We will be looking as a city at probably a 20% decrease across the board, but asking our council that we can come back with a planned half-year budget amendment, half fiscal year budget amendment, hoping that the wheels have started to turn and that we can make some dramatic shifts that normally we would wait for a normal budget. And I think a lot of you will be doing that, but I wonder if we shouldn't take that approach also, to ask staff to come up with 2 or 3 scenarios where we communicate with our membership, which I've really valued that we've grown as an organization, maybe back to a place, Cam, I don't know when we were last there, where every city and town is a member of the League of Cities and Towns. And that means a lot to me as a board member and as a mayor now. I want us to maintain that, but I think to think about an entire fiscal year right now may be a little bit too long for what we're looking at. So if we could communicate with our membership that we're going to take this in a phased approach, maybe every 6 months or something. I don't know. Have staff kicked that around at all?
We have. Where it gets tricky is that we don't see sales tax revenue coming in over the course of the year. We see really revenue come in several chunks. Dues at the beginning of the fiscal year, sponsorship money later in the year, and then the conference related money. That said, we could certainly put together some scenarios for the April meeting, and other leagues around the country are having this conversation too, about how to, we're one of the few leagues in the country that is 100% membership. So Mayor Mendenhall, I share that desire with you. My counterpart in Ohio, for example, only has about 75% of their cities as members. And as I hear the horror stories in other states, I'm grateful for all the work that you've done and that we've done to be 249 for 249. So we can look at some creative ways and realistic ways to still maintain that 249, but also make sure we're still capable of providing the value that people need from us legislatively, training wise, and in situations like COVID.
Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you. The next hand I have up. Oh yeah, go ahead, Mayor. And then we'll go to Matt.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand on this either. If I may, just along with what Cameron just said, and what would your thoughts be about actually putting out a letter to each of the cities from the board of directors about all of the great work that's taken place? Because I think we on this call recognize the board of directors understands that so much work that's taken place during this session, of course, but since then with this COVID virus, most of our counterparts have no idea. They don't know. And if we really are trying to help people understand where the value lies in keeping their membership with the Utah League of Cities and Towns, we need to literally help them understand where the value lies. And I think spell it out. And I think if we were able to help explain in letter form all of the things that have been done by the league to try to help and protect cities and to advocate for, and if it came from the board, instead of just from staff, if it came from the board, I think that might really help, because I do think that we have a lot of cities that will be looking at what can they cut, and if they don't understand where the value lies, this will be on the chopping block for a lot of our cities. And I would hate to see us become like Ohio and have 75%. I agree with everybody else. We feel so strongly that 100% is significant and it matters and it's a goal, but we're going to have to show cities why it's worth it.
Thank you,
So
Mayor.
President, I would welcome a motion giving us general direction that way. I see there are others who still want to talk, but just to plant that seed with you.
Okay, thank you. We'll get to that. Matt Durham and then Mayor Pike.
So Mike, I want to just echo what others have said about the value of the league, and also maybe educating some of our cities and towns about the value of the league. And my comment is pretty similar to Mayor Mendenhall's. I was just wondering if we've looked at what the impact of freezing the dues at the amount of last year would have on the organization, understanding that then we will have a lag of lower dues the following year. But I just think that might be something worth looking at.
Thank you, Mayor Pike.
I feel the same way as really, I think everybody else. I just feel the strongest sense of pride of the league, and in terms of what they do. I want to be able to provide all the dues that are necessary, but I think it's a really hard message to send when, certainly as Mayor Mendenhall expressed first, that that we're cutting our budgets about 20%, and we'll have to find ways to do that. I realize the struggle with the league is you probably already have, especially with canceling the spring convention, you probably already have most of your expenses in people, and so it just leaves you very little to be able to cut, Cameron. But I think we need to do the best we can, get as creative as we can, keep all the cities, if at all possible, give some flexibility, some ramp up, whatever. And some cities may be able to do more than others, just depending on their situation. So I think ultimate flexibility and fiscal responsibility on the league's part would be the best message to send.
Thank you, Mayor Bierman and then Mayor Niehaus.
Yeah, I have two concerns, really. I think that the perception of the dues going up, even if they're slightly in this coming year, as we're all cutting our budgets, is going to be problematic. But I'm equally as concerned about the following year, where the dip is going to catch up with us. And I think you're going to see a drop in sponsorship and membership dues at the same time. And so I think the thoughts about freezing the dues might make sense. And I would suggest we do it for 2 years. And that way, we're not dealing with increases this year, and we're not feeling a steep drop in the following year.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Niehaus.
I agree with freezing dues, and I agree too that league staff, you've been amazing, and you've been an amazing coordinator, especially with the Zoom meetings in particular. Those have been so awesome. I'm wondering if there is a resource for the league to make up. So as we're all looking at, businesses are looking at loans to get through loss of revenue, would there be a resource for the league to get, if you were to calculate what 2 months, the 2 months of dues from the cities and towns would be, see if you could find a resource for that money, and then maybe even pass on that forgiveness to cities and towns in their next due. So like actually a rate reduction potentially if the league staff were to be able to find a resource for that money.
Thank you both to Mayor Bierman and Mayor Niehaus and all of you, really. Because this is the exact conversation we wanted to have so that we could proceed accordingly. Mayor Niehaus, to your question, the league is an interlocal entity, so we are a public entity. If we were a nonprofit or organized under the tax code differently, like most leagues around the country, we could potentially qualify for SBA loans or other money out of the CARES Act. We don't, because we're a public entity. We can look into whether or not we could potentially qualify as any other local government for direct costs under the CARES Act. At this point, though, there is no state revenue source or federal revenue source to hold public entities that are interlocal entities or to help entities like ours. That could potentially occur in the fourth stimulus bill if Congress were to pass something, but that would be down the road. But certainly we can track, just like we're going to suggest to our cities and recommend to our cities, track the impacts of COVID. And I think we could make an argument to the state, whether they agree with it or not, but make an argument that canceling mid-year was directly related to COVID, and see if we could get some of that money reimbursed. And then, but in terms of the dues, I don't think there's a revenue source out there that would help on the dues front.
Thank you, Cam. Is anybody willing to try to verbalize a motion that would, again, this is not adopting the dues, but giving some direction to Cam and the staff of what information to get back to us next meeting so we can make a decision on the dues. That's when we'll need to make a decision, as in April.
Mike, this is Gary. I suppose I'd like to maybe see what happens with freezing the dues for 1 year. I'd be worried about freezing them for 2. And so maybe staff can bring back what that kind of operation would look like, knowing that their revenue comes in chunks. And then we can talk in April about what we need to do from there. And I guess I would make that as a motion.
Anybody want to second Gary's motion?
Can you restate that?
Sure. Have staff put together the budget with freezing dues for 1 year.
I'll second.
Motion made by Gary, seconded by Mayor Pike. All in favor, say aye.
Wait a minute. I would like to make a substitute motion that staff prepare at least 2 scenarios. One, according to Gary's motion, and a second one that reflects a 20% budget cut, because I think that various cities may be considering that.
Okay, we have a substitute motion.
Can I ask a question about that, Mayor? Is that a 20% reduction in fees or in overall revenues?
I think we better look for 20% in fees, because that's, cities may be considering cutting back that way. And maybe it's more aggressive to consider the loss of the sponsorship revenue as well, but we may get more than a 20% loss of that. So,
well, that's why I was wondering
20% budget cut.
I'm sorry. That's why I was wondering if we're already going to see a reduction in sponsorship revenue, I'm not sure we can afford to do a 20% reduction in fees as well.
Well, I don't know whether we can afford it, but we may be faced with that if we either have cities drop out because they aren't willing to pay at all, or if they are faced with implementing budget cuts in our city budget. If we're looking at cutting our city budget 20%, it's hard to justify not cutting everything. I know that's hard, but it's brutal.
Well, and I still wonder about some flexibility. In other words, we want to have all 249 cities in. And so I don't have a problem with two alternatives, Mayor Silvestrini, and also some sort of thought of flexibility. If a city wants to stay in but can only do so much, this may be the year to try to be able to be flexible on that.
President Mendenhall, can I just make a clarification to the motion?
Please do.
Okay, so what I have on Silvestrini, or Mayor Silvestrini's substitute motion, is at least two scenarios, which means that we don't need to just look at these two, one being the freezing of the dues for 1 year, and one being a potential 20% cut in dues, but also look at other scenarios and bring back a manageable number to you about how we can still fulfill our core mission for the members, but recognizing the economic uncertainty in which we find ourselves. The one thing, there are two things I just want to point out about if you do any sort of scaling of dues. Once you start going down the road of potential scaling for one city, you have to be fair and either open up for everybody or not at all. And I've been warned by fellow league directors about the potential consequences down the line of saying, okay, you can pay half now and half later. But that being said, right now the only information you have in front of you is what the current rate would do, and it sounds like there'll be the motion here, but that the sentiment in the room is to look at alternative scenarios, at least two of which being what are outlined in the motion, and be prepared for an in-depth discussion in April about what services we would also have to cut if our budget's being cut.
And let's see if adding to that motion, and I like that clarification of the motion, but add in a date in April. You can see at the bottom of the board meeting agenda that April 22nd was our next scheduled board meeting. The 13th of April is a date of where the governor's dates went out to. So again, none of us should be busy traveling certainly to Moab or St. George to be busy for a board meeting, but I know we have busy lives. But if somebody could put in the motion the next scheduled board meeting as well, we could kind of kill two birds with one stone here of when we could get that information prior to and then make a decision in April.
Right, and President, one other point of clarification is that in April you adopt the dues and then we bring the full budget to you in May. But we can't put together the full budget until you adopt the dues, since that's 2/3 of our budget. So just so everybody knows how the pieces fit on themselves, dues first, that's the majority of our budget. Any adjustments that you decide to make on dues will then factor into the budget conversation, and you would approve the tentative budget in May. But the dues drive it substantially.
Okay, so Mayor Silvestrini has a motion, a substitute motion on the table. It sounded like Mayor Pike was trying to get to maybe seconding it. I've got Mayor Bierman and Matt Durham's hand up as well.
I would second that substitute motion.
You can take my hand down.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Bierman, any discussion on the motion?
I just pulled my
Okay.
hand out too. I was going to offer it a second, but I do think even though we might not like what a 20% reduction would look like, I think it's valuable to have that information to contrast to our ultimate decision.
Perfect.
Thank you. Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay,
Perfect.
thank you.
Okay. All right, President, we will get to work on that. And what date did we settle on then for April?
Oh, that was my bad. We did not settle on a date. Sorry about that, everybody. Looking at the calendar.
So we could still continue with April 22nd. Or our preference would be to move it up a few days because we need to get dues out to members, and members are looking to, and everybody's scrambling to update their budgets. But we also need enough time to work through these alternatives. The other key point on timing is that the governor's COVID-19 directive expires 2 weeks from today, Monday, April 13th. And I think there's value in the board having regular calls. I don't want to inundate your time. You have plenty of calls anyway, but we could shoot for Monday, April 13th, because that could be a good check-in point of where we're at with COVID. And then that gives us 2 weeks to prepare some alternatives for you to consider.
So
Does everybody like April the 13th?
Sounds good.
Would that be a noon?
Yeah, noon is fine. Virtual lunch.
At this point, it's all Groundhog Day, so that works for me too.
Okay, so we do need a motion to change the date because we had adopted the previous calendar.
I'll make a motion. Sorry.
Motion by Jewel for Monday, April 13th. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mayor Silvestrini, second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you, Cam.
Okay, then President, in light of the time, Victoria, can I ask you to take 1 minute just to, we'll have your screen up to say, like, here are all the issues we see coming once COVID slows down. And then Roger, I'll ask you to take a quick minute to explain the opioid litigation and where that may go.
So despite that everything is COVID driven, there's actually still interim and other issues that were discussed during session. You should have in your packet the last slide that was shown at LPC about interim issues. And what we need you to think about is the priority of those. Some of these issues, 1 or 2 of them could consume most, if not all, the summer. We're already trying to figure out what to do about HB 374 and the building regulations and how to collect that information. But please take a look at these issues and think about them. And then in conjunction with that, think about how we can engage the membership to, get behind the prioritization of these issues, and what you think we could do differently with LPC during the interim. I haven't been around for that process, but if you feel like it's worked or hasn't worked, please let me know. I know in the last year or so, caucuses were organized, and we're curious to know if those worked as far as bringing consensus to issues and focusing in on them. Or if something like a survey of our members would be good to see what issues they think are important. So think about those things and how we can continue to bring consensus of our members, but also make sure that the league is working on the issues that are most important to the cities at this time. We had hoped that this interim would be a proactive one instead of reactive because the legislature was a little bit more quiet. But so far, everyone is just reacting to COVID. So hopefully at some point we can shift gears and re-examine that. So that's all I've got.
Thanks, Victoria. The one key takeaway for everyone here, though, is to see the amount of policy issues that are out there that will affect cities. Now, COVID and the economy may put some of these on the back burner and the legislature doesn't revisit them. But nevertheless, part of our job is to make sure we're prepared and recognizing everybody's going through an economic crisis, figuring out how to prioritize our limited time and soon to be more limited bandwidth will be critical. So we'll have that bigger conversation later this spring, but wanted to make sure this was at least in front of you. President, can we go to, oh, go ahead, Victoria.
On that note, and because COVID wasn't really lurking during session, maybe this list changes because of COVID. We've already had Representative Handy reach out and ask us for an May interim to come and talk about, do the cities need anything changed in state law or anything like that in response. So, that's probably one we need to add to the list.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you, Victoria. Cam, with 1 minute left on people's time clocks here, what do we want to get through with the rest of the agenda?
We need Roger can do the opioid thing in 1 minute. We just need general direction on that. And then because of the work at home instruction coming from the governor, we had put together this work from home policy, and all of us are working from home at this point and plan to in order to comply with the directive. So if you want to debate that policy at a later meeting, you can. If people are comfortable with that policy, then you can adopt it here. So, President, let's have Roger take a moment to give an overview on the opioid piece, because this could come down any minute and we'll need decisions.
There's a pending generalized settlement. Am I muted, or are you all right?
You're good, Raj.
Okay. There is a pending settlement with the three largest pharmaceutical entities involving opioids with all of the states. Utah, of course, was part of that. It is contingent upon all of the political entities in the state signing off on it. We have no pending litigation from any of our cities. There may be some from some counties. So when this particular proposal comes down, however, they're going to need to have waivers from all of the cities that they're not going to engage in any litigation. Given that we don't have any, that shouldn't be a problem. But we're going to have to send out information to all of the cities, explaining the situation, explaining the need to get a waiver, which the AG will prepare. I'm doing this very fast. What we're really looking for is your support for us preparing that packet, so when we get the information, we can ship it out and explain the need for signing it. Is that quick enough, Cam?
Yep, that is. So you don't need to make a decision today about your individual cities. We just want general direction from you to work with the AG's office to get information out to cities if and when that settlement comes. It was scheduled for March 21st, but then was delayed because of COVID.
And we would hope the letter would come from the board saying, here is the settlement, here is what you need to do, etc.
Roger, this is Len Harvey with North Salt Lake. I just had a question. We have assigned our legal rights to the county, I believe. How does that work with this settlement you're talking about?
If that's the case, then the county will have to make that decision. There are no cities that file their own litigation. We don't know. There may have been some counties, we don't think so. So the process will be, you'll have to indicate through your legal counsel that you assigned your rights, in this case, to the county, and so Davis County would be then signing off. There is not a lot of money in this, in the sense of, I think there's 27 million that we're talking about, and it has to go to opioid litigation, but it is still real money.
So, President, we would welcome a motion that would just give us general direction to prepare a letter for when that settlement comes, and then we would bring back to the board and then distribute to the membership.
Perfect. Anybody want to make a motion for that letter?
Christensen, so moved.
Thank you, Don. Motion by Don Christensen. Can I have a second?
Andy Bierman, I'll second.
Mayor Bierman, second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Perfect. Thank you.
And then, President, if people want to adopt the telecommuting policy, we can do that. We're functionally doing it now because of the governor's directive. And if people want to discuss it in more detail, we could do that at a later meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the telecommuting policy as it's been presented in the board packet.
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Silvestrini, and a second by Mayor Pike. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Perfect, that passes.
Great. Terrific. Thank you, everyone. And then the report from NLC is this. We had more people than ever before from Utah go to the NLC conference. And we had one sponsor that fell through because of COVID travel. So we spent more than we've ever spent at NLC because of that sponsor issue. So the good news is we had great participation. The bad news is that it was rather costly for us as an organization. And even worse news is we had 2 of our attendees who tested positive for COVID-19, 2 council members from Salt Lake City. At this point, we haven't heard of anybody else from the 80 plus Utahns who were back there, and we as staff didn't contract it either. But it was a very informative conference. It was my first participation in the National League of Cities Board of Directors. It was my first board meeting back there. Made a lot of connections about how to improve conferences, how to improve trainings, coordination on advocacy and the like. So it was very, very worthwhile conference, but it was a sign of things to come.
It was a good conference, and thanks for everybody that attended and came out. Utah was very well represented there and across a lot of different sections and subsections of the conference. So appreciate everybody's attendance, and I appreciate everyone's attendance here today. If there's no other business that needs to become for the board today, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mayor Mike Caldwell, and I'm not sure who seconded it, but all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Stay well, everybody.
Stay safe, everybody.
Perfect. Thanks,
Stay
everyone.
home.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Cameron, thanks for all you do.
Mayor Christensen, great to see you.
You
Sorry,
too.
who was that?
All of you.
Thanks, Don.
All right. Thank you, everybody.